Hello and good morning. Um, the reason I'm recording this video is I want to talk about link fields and the difference between using an internal link reference to an item versus using a URL reference to an item when that item exists on your same site. And the reason I want to talk about this is that what I've seen as common practice with content editors is that they want to establish a link between an item links field and another item that happens to be on the same site. The and in doing that, instead of using an internal link, they might decide to use an external link, which is on the second item I have selected right now. And the problem with that, well, there's some disadvantages to that, which is what I want to highlight in this video. Okay, now I can sort of understand why they may want to do this. If you're a content editor testing pages all the time, you become really familiar with the external link of an item. And if you insert an internal link, particularly on a link field that doesn't have an internal link already established, then you have to be able to navigate to that item and select it. And this site is pretty simple. And one of the things I do like about the XM Cloud version of Sitecore is that it separates the page structure from the data structure. So because that's the case, there should be less digging to get to a particular page. But if you have a well sophisticated page content infrastructure, you may still have to navigate a number of folder levels to get to the particular page you're after, particularly if buckets are involved. But imagine trying to find something within a bucket on top of that. It takes a little bit of work to get to that particular item. So I can understand the desire to not use an internal link, but to use an external link instead, where if you happen to have the external link handy, all you got to do is paste it into one field and you're done. So I can understand the reason or the desire to do that, but the problem is that it tends to lead to disadvantages that you wouldn't have to deal with if you stick with an internal link. At the heart of the advantages versus the disadvantages of this comes down to what's stored when you have an internal link referencing another item on the same site. If using the view ribbon, if I turn on raw values, which shows what's stored within this link field on the database supporting this particular site, you'll see that what's stored is the GUID of the item that's being referenced. So even though what you see is the path when you use the GUI version of a link field, what you see in raw values that's actually stored is the GUID referencing that item. If I remove the raw values checkmark, as I just mentioned, when you go back to the link field, what you see is the path to the item rather than the GUID that it's actually storing about the item. I think I'm fine with this because that makes it clear that it knows where the item is and how you would look for it. Because if all I had was the GUID in this GUI version, then I would have to search for it most likely. But if it gives me the direct path, I could just follow it to the item. Plus, what I'm used to now is that when I do see a GUID on the GUI version, that tells me that the link is broken and I need to link it to another item instead. But the deal here is that because the GUID is actually stored, which I actually copied into this notepad here, which I'm going to bring into this screen. There we are. If I search for the item by its path and look at its GUID, it happens to be that same GUID, and that's what it knows about the item. Now, this is advantageous for a couple of reasons. The couple of reasons is that because it identifies it by GUID, even though it's showing me the path, it means that as long as the item is on the site somewhere, this link will always adjust to find the item, whether I rename it, move it, what have you. And I'll actually demonstrate that as part of this video to make it clear why you should stick with an internal link. The problem with just keeping it to an external link is that this particular value for the external link is paramount, meaning that if anything about this item changes, this link is broken, and then you have to go in and manually change it. If I look at the raw value of this, you're going to notice that what's stored as the raw value is the URL. That's all it knows about the item in question, even though it's internal to your own site. So because that's the case, if you change anything about the item that doesn't support this URL, the link is broken and you'll have to relink it again. Which if you stuck to an internal link, as long as the GUID's the same, no matter what you do to this item, the link never breaks. I'll show you. If I go to this item and I change its name, I'm just going to call it new about name. Okay. As you can in Sitecore, when you give an item a name, that becomes part of its URL by default. So if I go to the promo example, which has the internal link, note that it changes to reflect the new link name of the item. So the link doesn't break. It still can find the item at any time. However, if I go to the external URL, it still thinks that the URL is the about name, excuse me, and it doesn't reflect the new about name that I just renamed it to. Because when you have an external link, it assumes that the URL in question most likely is associated with a system outside this site. So it has no means to go back to that external site and make any updates if the URL changes. So this URL remains static until you go in and change the URL. So if I keep it an internal link, I never have to worry about changing it. If the URL changes because the name of the item changes, it'll be reflected when this link is used to go directly to that item. And I don't have to worry about changing a thing. I don't even have to worry about republishing this out because the item will adjust based on what happened to the item based on that GUID reference. If I move it, I created this new folder on purpose so I can actually perform a move. So I'm going to click on this item. I'm going to use my home move to command to move it to another folder. This may take a second. I know it's coming. Okay, let's see here. While I'm waiting, I'm going to pause the video a second. Okay, my move screen is here. So what I'm going to do is choose link folder 2 and click on move. All right, now it's moved to a new folder. If I go to promo example, note that the new folder is reflected in the link, meaning that because what didn't change about the item is the GUID, it's always able to find the item as long as the GUID is still on the system. So if I continue to use an internal link, I never have to change a thing regarding this item and this link field. However, if I go back to the external link example again, note that it still thinks the item is in link folder 1. Okay, because with an external link, it's not going to double check that the URL is still correct, even if it's referencing an item inside its own site. So that's why using an external link is not advantageous over an internal link. Because with an internal link, because it's linked to that item by its GUID, anytime you change anything about the item in terms of where it's located or what you name it, the link will always be able to find it because what it knows about the item is all it needs to know, which is its GUID. And because I used an internal link, it already knows by default that I'm still on the same site. So that's why it stores the GUID, because it knows the item still has to exist within our system. So as long as that's the case, it will always reflect your latest changes to the item as it reflects to its presence in the infrastructure of your site, whether you change the name or change its location. This also means that if I move these items to another environment, as long as I package up the item with the link field with the item that it's linked to and install it on another environment, these links remain intact and it will still continue to work. That makes it far less delicate than an external link, which requires you to maintain this link if anything changes about its URL. As of right now, if I was to publish out all these changes and use this item, this link is broken. I'm going to get a 404 error or something along those lines, while the link on this item is perfectly fine because regardless of the changes I've made, because it's linked by the GUID, it knows where to find the item no matter what I do to it, as long as I keep it within this site. And that's the main reason why you want to use an internal link to reference anything internally on your site rather than resorting to an external link, even though it's far easier to do that. There's another reason that I would say you want to use an internal link, and this has to deal with the processing part of this. I'm going to bring a slide into this area, and this is something I actually put on my blog about this. For me to use an external link to reference an item that's internal to my site is like me being in my house with my uncle, where I know my uncle is inside the house. I know where to look for him. But rather than using an internal link, which would simplify my ability to find him, what I do instead is make it an external link. And in making it an external link, that's like asking me to leave my own house, come back into my house, knock on the door, and then ask for my uncle, which I knew was inside my house the whole time anyway. So, from the perspective of a processing the call using the link, the external link is going to use far more processing than an internal link will. Because when you make it an internal link, you already told Sitecore, the thing I'm looking for or the person I'm looking for is already inside my house. So I just need to be able to find them inside the house. And how am I able to find them? Because I already know the GUID, which is the same thing as saying, I already know where he is inside my house. So I just got to go over there. Okay. While if it's an external link, I'm forcing Sitecore to translate the URL into an item, and then only based on that item path find the person or find the item. So that's why you want to keep using internal links for things inside your Sitecore site and leave the external links for items that are actually outside the site, which you can only reference by URL because you have no other information about what's going on with that link. I hope that this provides insight into what version of a link you should use when referencing an item inside the site that you're referencing, and that by doing so, you'll stick with internal links and only use external links when the item you're trying to reference is actually outside the site. Take care, and I hope you found this